Well, hello, and thank you for tuning into our podcast, Manna at the Tap. It's Saturday, April 20th, 2024, and we are at the end of the third week of Easter. As always, Saturday is the recap day when we focus on one or two specific things we've gleaned from the many lectionary texts from the past week. One of my favorite narratives in the Bible is the story of Joseph and the dynamics in his family. His brothers openly hated him. And when their father Jacob sent him to see how they were doing, they used the opportunity to kidnap him, and they even planned to murder him. But they settled into selling him into slavery. They knew how much their father loved him, and they told their father a story of finding Joseph's robe soaked in blood. Jacob looked it over and said that it was Joseph's coat, and he assumed some savage animal had eaten him after tearing him to pieces. And Jacob was sad about the loss of his son. Joseph was just 17 years of age when he was sold into slavery. And when he arrived in Egypt, he was auctioned off. It must have been the most frightening experience for Joseph, alone, without family or companion. He was handsome, and the wife of Potiphar, his boss, liked young, attractive men. And she attacked Joseph, but he sprinted out of his coat and ran. Then she accused him of attacking her, and she had the evidence, his coat. What was Potiphar to do? He chose his wife's story over Joseph's story, and Joseph was imprisoned. He was promised help from a servant of Pharaoh, but he soon forgot until Pharaoh had a disturbing dream that his own wise men could not interpret. And then Joseph was called. After spending 13 years in prison, he was freed and became second in command of the Pharaoh because he was the only one with a solution to the dream. There were to be 7 years of plenty, and Joseph wasted no time accumulating Egypt's abundance. Then the famine came, and that would last for 7 years, and the world had to buy grain from Egypt. So Jacob also needed his sons to buy grain in Egypt. And imagine Joseph's shock when he saw 10 men speaking the language of his boyhood. He recognized them, but they did not recognize him because he was dressed as an Egyptian. Just imagine the emotions, the feelings buried deep down inside of Joseph. Revenge must have twirled into his mind as he began to remember his boyhood. He was now in a position to get revenge. They needed the grain of Egypt, and the famine was severe. But Joseph put aside the thoughts of revenge that were twirling through his mind as he asked them questions, and he learned that his little brother and father were still alive. Joseph did not allow revenge to control him. He instead focused on forgiveness. With that in mind, he could see that God was in the mess of his life, MESS, in the mess of his life, and had sent him down to Egypt so he could save his family. Joseph wrestled with forgiving his brothers and requested that they bring their younger brother, the next time they wanted to buy grain in Egypt. Until now, the brothers cannot understand why this Egyptian is mistreating them. And now it was time to go back to Egypt. The famine was at its worst, and Judah approached Jacob, their father, asking that Benjamin, who was Joseph's brother, was to accompany them to Egypt, or they would not be able to buy grain. Jacob struggled to let him go, but in the end, Judah promised to return Benjamin. Seeing his brother Benjamin for the first time in all of these years caused Joseph to reveal himself to his brothers and genuinely forgive them. He was so overcome with emotions that he cried so loudly that everyone in Pharaoh's house could hear him. The brothers were surprised when Joseph declared it was him. They didn't believe him. So he sent all the Egyptians out of the room and showed himself to his brothers. What Joseph did was show his brothers that he was circumcised just like they were. The sign of circumcision was proof to them, even though on the outside Joseph looked like an Egyptian. The joy and celebration that followed included letting the Egyptians know they were his brothers. Joseph had been assured when in prison that God was with him, and he carried this knowledge with him as he used the wisdom to navigate that period in time. In the end, Joseph was reunited with his father after 22 years of not seeing each other. I can feel the tears filling my eyes as they hugged each other and wept. The lesson for this week: even when we cannot see God, God is working all the events of our lives together for our good. We can trust that all will be well.